Hi, my name is K.Thomas, W1DED. Today I have with me James Gallo, KB2FMH. James has joined me before on the show, most recently as he was preparing to go to American Samoa to operate a DXpedition as KH8 RRC. We thought it'd be a good idea to have him back on so he could talk about that experience. Welcome, James.
Thanks for having me, Kevin. And it's good to be home after 16 days on the island, almost 20 days of travel. Let me tell you, it's a journey to get there, but it was a lot of fun.
Give us a quick overview of what this DXpedition was all about.
It started as part of the Russian Robinson Club Activity Month, and the North American liaison, Yuri, N3QQ, gave me a call. We've been on expeditions together before. And he said, James, I'm going to American Samoa in a couple of weeks. Would you like to join me? And I said to him, all right, just you and I. Who else is coming? And he said, well, at first it was going to be me. Now it's me and you. And let's see if we can get somebody else. So we reached out to our friend Hal, W8HC, who was with us on Kiska Island last summer. And he jumped at the opportunity to come and help put KH8 as a prefix on the air, as well as the park, 0053, the island, because the Russian Robinson Club is big on island activations, and also the very rare grid. So we gave people not only the DX entity, but a park for both programs, K and KFF. IOTA people got their piece of the pie, and the grid chasers got that bonus too. AH45 Papa Romeo is apparently a seldom, if ever, activated grid. So we made a lot of people happy to the tune of 26,679 queues in the log, with a surprisingly high unique ratio of 10,565 uniques. So, of course, many people want to get band fills, but that's a darn good unique ratio for such a number of total queues. Most people try to get a 10 or 20% unique. We got about a 30%, 35% unique, which is pretty good.
That's impressive. Nearly 27,000 queues is certainly impressive. Tell us more about the setup itself, like where you were located, what you set up for antennas, what you brought for gear.
Well, to start at the beginning, which is always the best way, we had intended to get a house within the park. See, in American Samoa, the National Park Service leases the acreage that they manage as a national park, but the agreement they have with the American Samoa people as an autonomous governing body, even though it's it's a territory of the United States, they have their own governmental system and their own cultural laws and rules. They still have people living within the park, and it is public access. So if we would have gotten the house that we wanted to rent to live in the park, we would have set up there. But the last minute, the guy backed out. So our friend Hal, that came in as a last minute, had a friend down there from a previous expedition to Swains in 2012. So his friend reached out to the Park Service, who enabled us to use a building, not a habitable, but a usable building with electricity on Mount Alava, 1,600 feet above sea level, which is better than the place we were going to stay. And we ended up getting a nice Airbnb down in the valley, so to speak, where we would eat and sleep and shower and, keep our personal activities going on down there. But every waking moment, short of a few trips to shop and eat and an interview on a local FM radio station, we were on the air from that mountaintop as best we could. And we did have hard electricity there. We didn't need generators, so that was good. But no running water to speak of. There was a hose spigot outside that may or may not have been, working well. So we really couldn't stay there. Any sanitary needs besides watering a tree had to be taken down at the B&B, which was a beautiful place. But we operated with wire dipoles, which we made on site I made a fan for 12 and 17, a single for 20. I did bring a manufactured double bazooka for 40 meters, which surprisingly, with the little tuner that only does a 5-to-1 or less in my expert amplifier, I was able to get it to work on 10, 12, 15, and 17 in addition to 40. Couldn't get it to work on 20. Thus, I made the 20-meter wire dipole. And I want to say I'm quite proud of myself because after all the calculations and measurements and erecting, it was a 1.36 to 1 center of the phone band, first time in the air. I then made the dedicated 12 and 17 because my friend Hal wanted to do some 40-meter work with digital and CW, and he didn't have an antenna. So I said, all right, use the bazooka, and I'll take advantage of 12 and 17, which were acting very well. So the same results. I made this quick fan dipole with some balance that were generously donated by our friends Tim and Terry at DX Engineering. Always got to applaud DXE because they support us so much. And again, it worked with like a 1.4 on both bands in the center of phone. So I was pretty happy with my impromptu dipole erection. And we supported them on spider poles and trees. We didn't have enough spider poles. We only had 3. So we used a couple of trees to hoist up some other antennas for 30. Another 10, 15, and 30 fan dipole that Yuri made, and a 60-meter vertical. That took one of the poles. Hal used the 60-meter vertical towards the end because a good friend of ours in Florida, KE5EE, popular DXer and just heard everywhere, Stan Schwartz. I don't know if anybody knows him, but whenever he's on, he's heard everywhere because the guy's got we call it the $1 million antenna farm, where he's got stacked Yankees for every band, even to 160. I think he's got a stack for 160 as well as a couple of 4 squares for 80 and 160. But that's another story. So he kind of coerced us into giving him 60-meter CW. We tried phone. It just wasn't working, but he did get his CW contact, which enabled him to donate to us and become one of the Century Club supporters of KH8 RRC. But overall, it was really an activation to help the Russian Robinson Club Activity Month celebrate its 30th anniversary. The same thing we did in Cuba with the Charlie Oscar Zero RRC, which kicked off the actual anniversary back in April, May, I would say. But July is the activity month for the Russian Robinson Club, and there were dozens of stations around the world using the suffix RRC or RC, depending on what their country. And we had stations on in dozens of countries, all celebrating the 30th anniversary. So we were part of a collective celebration, but it seems that we were the most popular because the other RRC stations were all calling me, either on voice or, of course, having their computer kick ours, as I like to say, for the FT8 and Hal's amazing CW. So that's the gist of why it happened.
There certainly was a lot of buzz on social media about your activation. I heard it for days. But I want to go back to this idea that there's a lot of problem solving. It seems to me that's a big part of ham radio, just solving problems. How did the housing situation fall apart that late in the game?
About a week before we were scheduled to get on the planes, we all flew out of our hometowns on July 3rd. So let's say around June 27, 28, Yuri, who was making the arrangements, got a message back from this guy, Steve, who had the Airbnb, a local Samoan who had a house he rented within the park's property. He said, sorry, guys, I have to cancel. I have some plumbing issues. Yuri told him, one of our men coming there, one of our operators, is a professional New York City plumber. Maybe he can fix it. And the guy was adamantly against that. We think something else happened where he didn't want to, or he couldn't rent to us, but he used the plumbing problem as an excuse, which most people would say, oh, that's terrible. Plumbing problems are horrible. But, being a licensed plumber in New York, I don't see any plumbing issue as a problem because they have supplies because they build things there, and I could easily fix whatever it was. But he just backed out. We quickly got a replacement at a much nicer place, by the way. Again, we couldn't set up there because it's not in the park, and I wanted this to be a POTA activation because the park there has never been activated, and you know how our POTA people are. They're vultures for the Atno, and they all want it. So being an ardent POTA supporter, I wanted to give them that, as well as the island, because a lot of them cross collect between islands and other things besides the DX. So we were lucky to find this woman Tamara, who had a nice 3-bedroom house. They're all one level there with tin roofs, cinder block structures with tin roofs because of the weather. And she gave us a nice deal on a 3-bedroom house. Each room had its own bathroom, full bathroom, a completely modern, updated, outfitted kitchen, nice backyard to relax in, parking for the car. We rented a little Toyota RAV4 from a guy who ended up living right next to us at that house. So it all worked out conveniently. For a while we were nervous that we were going to have to camp out in the park and sleep in that building or in tents. But it worked out where, we had a nice place to live, and we got to operate from the top of the mountain as opposed to the side of the hill on the southern side, which would have been a damper on our takeoff angle to North America and Europe and Asia, so to speak, because we would have been only facing the South Pole with a huge mountain behind us. So it worked out for the best. Sometimes when the bad things happen, the silver lining shines through, and there it was for us. So we lucked out tremendously.
So, James, you also found yourself, as you explained, building a lot of antennas. Would you do that differently in the future? Would you have brought different antennas?
I had brought an off-center fed dipole, which is good from 6 through 80, exclusive of 15. For some reason, the dimensions of this one I have doesn't work on 15 meters for some reason, or at least it won't work with power, and it needs to be tuned. But we didn't have really the space for that. There was so many trees in the area we were that stringing it in a straight line would have presented a problem. So we just said, all right, we brought wire. I brought a 300-foot spool of 14-gauge flex weave, another generous gift from our friends at DXE, along with the balance of filters, some other things. I did get a couple of hard cases to transport these 2 spider beams, which I had previously acquired. Although on our next mission, I'm going to ask Tim to give me another spider beam or one of their DXE telescopic poles, because I love the way they helped us get the wires up within the forest rather than always trying to sling over trees. I've got 2 of the 12-meter or 40-foot heavy-duty telescopics, which did a lot for us. But I brought wire, I brought some balance, dog bones or end isolators, as we would professionally call them. And we just decided we're going to make antennas for what we need. I mean, we're all experienced hams. We know the theory of doing it. It's just that we're at the point in life where we're lazy, so it's easier to buy one and have it delivered, by UPS. But because of the fact that we didn't know what we were going to encounter, I did bring wire at the request of Yuri, and he had asked for these particular, an assortment of balance, and it worked out. We knew how to make them, and again, I got lucky on first cut. The SWR was good; they were resonant, and they worked well. They were horizontal, which is better when you're at elevation, not in close proximity to the water. Sure, in the scheme of things, we're on an island in the middle of the South Pacific, 14 degrees south of the equator. And yes, the drains do run counterclockwise. I checked it in the kitchen. Hal and I videoed it for his granddaughter, who's a science buff. So when I was doing it, he said, do that again. I want to video it so I could send it to my granddaughter. So we filled up one of the 2 kitchen sink things, pulled the drain, and as it starts to spiral counterclockwise to show it in the video, I sprinkled a lot of black pepper and and red pepper like you see in the pizza shops, those little red pepper flakes. So it showed the counterclockwise spinning, and that was pretty cool. But back to the antenna situation. We wanted to use a vertical. I did because I find them easier to build on the poles, but they wouldn't have given us the takeoff and the radiation patterns that we wanted, which we prefer when we're on a beach. Closer to the ocean, we use verticals or vertical dipole arrays, VDAs. But from where we were, the horizontally polarized dipoles performed magnificently. Kevin, I never expected to get into your state. I got a lot of people in Maine telling me 5.9 plus 5 plus 10. There's a lot of recordings out there. If you search YouTube for our call sign, you'll see a lot of hams worldwide made short little audio or video recording of their radio while I'm talking. Now there's a couple of CW ones, but that's not interesting to listen to. You want to hear voices talking and see the signal reports, and to get a video, a radio screenshot with my voice from Spain or from Nova Scotia, from South America, from New England area, and you see the signal on the radio is hitting 10 to 15 over 9. And to think that I'm like 8,000 miles from the northeast of the U.S. and even further into Europe, we presume we were going over the poles to hit Europe rather than across the U.S. or the back end in through Asiatic Russia, over Moscow and into Europe. It might have went that way, but the predictions and propagation historically has put over the pole, over the North Pole contact. So that's got to be 15,000 or more miles that our signals were traveling. And from my view as the talker, I was the only SSB operator there. And I'm just fascinated by the fact that my voice is heard that many miles away with such strength and clarity. I was using a kilowatt plus amplifier, but single wire dipoles with no gain other than the fact that we got them up as high as we could, 30, 35 feet. The balance were a little too heavy to go to the tips of the 40-meter spiders, so we collapsed the tip to where the uppermost portion was about 3/4 of an inch rather than the little 3/8. You've seen the spider poles. They can get really thin. They're great for wire, but to pull a ballon in a 4-inch electrical box up there with some weight on the heavy toroids, because we needed the QRO, because I don't like to operate low power. But I did bring my 480HX in case the amp went bad. At least I'd have 200 versus 100. And I know you're a fan of the HX for that reason, because 200 really does do a lot better.
I certainly am. So remind us what you guys took for gear, and did you have any issues with any of the gear you took?
No, not at all. It worked flawlessly. I did bring a backup microphone and 2 headsets with mine. The SSB station was the 480HX. There's a photo of the SSB station on our QRZ page towards the bottom if anybody's interested. And there's a lot of photos up there now and some links to a couple of other things. Oh, wait, like I tell you, some other service project we performed after our FM broadcast interview. That was pretty interesting. But my 480 was the SSB radio, an Expert 1.3K amplifier wired for 110 volts. And the reason I chose the SPE Expert is because at 110 volts, it will still give you full power out, as opposed to an ACOM or an Alpha, where if it's not 220, you're getting half power at 110. Plus, the Expert is only 23 pounds. Quite easy to travel. I carried it with me as my carry-on because I was afraid of it getting damaged. But I did get a hard case for it, not a Pelican, something from Nanook, which is better than Pelican, with the foam, which I put it in when I got home thinking I don't want to carry that thing around anymore. And I am comfortable that it'll be safe because of the way the long case, like a gun case, handled the spider poles without any damage at all. And they all come with the TSA approved locks, so I don't have to put the padlocks on them and worry about opening them. So that's a convenience. But the other station, Hal brought a Elecraft K3, and he paired that to one Juma 1000. These Russian amplifiers, Jumas, they're very nice. They work on 110 also, and they'll give you 1,000, 1,100 out. We don't push them too hard, though. He runs at about 700, 800 for his CW and one of the FT8s. And we had a pair of Sun SDR2 Pros for FT8 also. We used one at a time. We brought one as a backup, and they're really small. They're like the size of a paperback book, like maybe 6 by 8, 1 inch thick. Beautiful little radios. They will do 100 watts on their own. You know, they're all SDR type, so it's all you do is plug power in. It has a microphone jack, you know, and like an RJ11 jack. But you run it, you do all the manipulation of it from the computer, which you know, I'm not accustomed to. I like knobs, so I was happy with my 480, which I paired seamlessly to the Expert amplifier. So when I changed bands on the radio, it automatically changed the band on the amplifier, selected the right antenna, which you have to program initially. You know what antennas. It has 4 outputs, one antenna output for which bands. So I set all that up. We used 8X, low loss 8X, again from DXE. We had about 700 feet, four 100-foot runs, 275s, 350s, a bunch of barrel connectors in case we had to extend, and we did extend some. And believe it or not, I found no loss. I mean, if I'm putting a 1,200 watts through 150 feet of 8X and I'm hitting main with S9 plus 10, I would say the loss in the coax is negligible. I read a lot of stuff on the Facebook POTA channel about people worrying about loss from coax, and I could tell you, 8X even at 200 feet, you're not going to notice the difference in signal loss if conditions are good. So I would vouch for using the lighter cable if you can, rather than dragging 8 or 213. And Hal was using his K3 tied into, we all use the N1MM logger, and we enabled a special gateway to push Club Log live stream, which people loved. You know, as soon as I hit enter, or the FT8 station enters it in the log, it shows on the live stream, and that makes people happy. And it also reduces the accumulation of duplicates. We had out of 26,679, I think we had 100 dupes, which is really terrific. Given, for an expedition, usually they'll get 500 or 1,000 dupes. We didn't have 100 because I'm the QSL manager, so I cleaned the log, and I was surprised when after duping it didn't reduce the total by more than 100. And then to see how many uniques we had, that was really terrific. But those were the primary 3 operating positions, switching between bands. I stayed at SSB because I don't like digital, and I haven't touched a key since 1986 after getting general. I'm a talker, and I love doing that. And Hal was back and forth between the FT8 and the CW. And as I mentioned, Yuri, our team leader liaison, he left on day 3 after getting notice that his father was gravely ill over in Siberia, in Novosibirsk, Siberia. So he scrambled to find flights. And let me tell you, it's not easy to find a flight into Russia from the U.S. in general. As far as the expedition goes, collectively, we all traveled about 20,000 miles between us. Myself was 8,000 from New York to Honolulu, and then Honolulu down to American Samoa, which took 18 hours of airplane. And going back, it took a little bit longer because I had a layover in Honolulu for a half a dozen plus hours, which I took advantage of and slept a little bit in a local motel. But the stations, they served us well. That's all I could say. I'm very impressed with how it all worked. Very happy with what we did. We tried to always be at the radios for both sides of the gray line. So, I would be waking up at 5:30 in the morning, get up to the mountain by 6, and be out there for 6:30 when the sun is rising for us. And it would be sun setting in Europe. And then when we had our sunset, we would be getting sunrise in Europe, dragging it across to the East Coast. So, we kind of had a set pattern of operation, but every once in a while, a band would open, 12 or 15 or 17 would open around the world. And I had some good runs with extremely deep pileups, which I'd like to say worked so much better this time than the previous Cuban expedition.
James, what's next for you now that you're back from American Samoa?
We always say that, and I have this vision of me sitting on the last day on Cayo Coco back in, I guess it was May 4th, we were leaving. And I looked at Yuri, and the president of the RRC came in from Siberia, and also named Yuri. And I just said, all right, guys, where do we go next? What's our next one? So again, we always say that. And Yuri N3QQ said, if we can't get this place we're looking for in the South Pacific, I'm not going to mention it because I don't want to jinx it, but I can tell you that Hal and I went to visit at his home, not the office, at his home, the South Pacific manager for U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, a fellow named Brian. We went to visit him to discuss accessing a nearby island that we've been after for a while and hasn't been activated since I think 91. And I've got the logs from a turtle scientist who happened to be a ham who went on the air. He got maybe 100 calls over the months he was there, and he kept a horrible log, sometimes just a call sign, maybe a date, maybe a time. I'm trying to hash it all out to give QSL to these people from 1991 because it's that rare. The problem is another group was slated to go in 20. COVID came. They lost it in 21 because of COVID. American Samoa just shut down their airport because they didn't want COVID there. They ended up getting it, but not as bad as everyone else. Nonetheless, being that there's no COVID this year, if the team that has this location slated does not go or does not announce by October, he's going to switch the permit to us for next summer. So that's one of the options. But if we don't get that, there's a couple of archipelagos off the coast of Mozambique in the Indian Ocean that also happen to be POTA entities. ATNOs, of course, because who the heck is there? There's nobody in Mozambique except expeditioners, and most of them go to the comfortable places. We're going to go to one of the two archipelagos that are all part, every square inch of each one is part of a national park within our POTA system. So I don't even have to add it, which makes it easier. To step aside for a minute, for those chasing, and about Whiskey 8 Sierra, the upcoming Swains Island expedition in October, I'm working to try to find a way to get that into POTA because it is a marine wildlife sanctuary. But the catch is, Kevin, and you know this as one of our staff members now in the mapping world, it's a privately owned island. You can get permission to access it, but you can't just go there on your, say, hey, let's fly and land there, or let's boat over and, jump on the island and activate like you can do in a park. But that would be for anybody going there. All you need to do is work with the Fish and Wildlife and get a permit from the owner, a family called the Jennings family, one of which them lives on American Samoa, another one lives in Texas. But they'll happily give you permission to operate there. It's a nasty place. A lot of bugs, humid, 8 to 10 feet is probably the highest elevation above sea level. So if there's a big wave that comes through, you're getting washed out to sea. You might end up on the coast of Japan being found by Japanese fishermen. That's how low it is and how small it is. But any of the islands and atolls down there, the smaller ones, the risk of getting washed out are always there. So you hope that it doesn't happen. Bring some rope to tie yourself to a tree that's fairly well rooted, just in case. Or get survival suits like the fellas use to swim to Bouvet in, those orange inflatable suits with the the strobes and the EPIRBs just in case. But if we don't get the island we want, which is about 160 miles northeast of American Samoa, so for all you people who know how to get to Google Earth quickly, you'll know what I'm talking about, because there's only one speck of rock sticking out of the ocean at that location. It's going to be one of the archipelagos in Mozambique. So, we got to go somewhere. Might as well be a POTA entity.
Well, James, it's always entertaining talking to you, and I appreciate the recap from your American Samoa trip. Looking forward to getting the details on your next trip. Thanks for joining me today.
Oh, has it been that long already? Wow, it feels like we're talking 10 minutes, Kevin. Always a pleasure to chat with you with a cup of coffee and a headset.
Always good to talk to you. 73. Talk to you soon.
All right, brother. Ciao. Bye-bye.